the first to do something, okay, like maybe not the first ever, but like, I mean, at least something on like a smaller scale. You know, like for me, I really wanted to be the first second generation black belt in my family. That never happened, but it was something I wanted for a while. And the reason I asked that is because today we get to talk about UFC 199, which in the main event featured honestly a really big first in UFC history. UFC 199 took place June 4th in 2016 at the Forum venue in Inglewood, California. It brought in an attendance of a little under 16,000 with a total gate of just over $2.1 million. But in the commentary team was the classic team of Joe Rogan and Mike Goldberg. And on the prelims, there were some great things to bring up. The very first fight on the prelims was just an absolute slobber knocker. It was awesome. Marco Polos Reyes knocks out Dong Hyun Ma in the final round. And seriously, if you haven't seen this fight before, hunt it down. Not a lot of people talk about this fight because, again, it's the first fight on an entire night of fights on a pay-per-view, and it rightfully won Fight of the Night. Jessica Andrade stopped Jessica Penne in the second round with a violent reenactment of prime Wanderlei Silva. And I know everybody always says that Chris Cyborg is closer to Wanderlei Silva, but I personally think Jessica Andrade fights more like him, and I think that's awesome, honestly. And finally, in another great fight, Brian Ortega mounts this wild third-round comeback to KO Clay Guida in a performance that everyone always talks about whenever they bring up his career and what he's done, and for good reason. I mean, it really is a genuinely awesome comeback for him. But now we get to the main card. And opening the main card, we have a really cool lightweight fight between Dustin Poirier and Bobby Green. At this point, both guys on that crossroads. Dustin Poirier was on a 3-fight winning streak after coming back to lightweight. He spent a lot of time down, where a lot of us got to know him, was at featherweight. And for Bobby Green, he's coming off a decision loss to Edson Barboza, but he was streaking huge before that fight. He had 8 straight wins that started in Strikeforce. 2 of the wins on there were Josh Thompson, Pat Healy, who was definitely really good coming out of Strikeforce. And then he also had this like really weird TKO over James Krause where he cup kicked him and got the win. It's definitely really weird. Look it up if you haven't seen it. And out the gate, we have this orthodox southpaw matchup. Dustin's having some success moving into punch. And so Bobby Green is doing these great shoulder rolls and these, his great head movement. But while he's talking, he gets blasted by Dustin, who steps in with this big combination. Bobby Green survives, but after some more striking, it's clear Dustin has the big advantage, and he's even showing shades of his future advanced striking that we know and love him for today. Green gets clobbered specifically with this massive left hand as he starts circling. Dustin follows up with some shots, and that's a first round KO. I'm going to give this fight a 7.5 out of 10. It was a ton of fun seeing a young Dustin Poirier just put on this great performance like this. I mean, honestly, he shows up every fight. Like, I think I've seen maybe, one bad Poirier fight. And I couldn't even tell you what it was because I'm just assuming maybe there's one. But I just wish the fight lasted a little longer. In the next fight, we have a middleweight matchup between Dan Henderson and Hector Lombard. And I'm gonna say something here. This is probably a wild claim, but I have some points to back me up. Dan Henderson is a bona fide GOAT contender, and he might be the most successful fighter in MMA history. He is considered to be the first double champ ever. He has been a champion in every major promotion he's fought in. Pride? Yeah. Strikeforce? Yeah. He also won a UFC title. Now, the UFC will never tell you he did because he did this in the pre-Zuffa days, but he won a UFC tournament back in the day and was given a title and a belt for it. But at this time, Dan Henderson was on a rough streak. His first fight back was this barn burner of an all-time classic against Shogun Rua. After that, he went 2-6. And early on, both guys are being cautious of each other's power, tossing out kicks, trying to see what they can get going. Lombard's feigning well, giving forward pressure, but he gets clipped. He's backing up, and Henderson's looking to attack him. And Lombard just blasts him with a huge left hand that briefly stuns him. From there, he works on an Americana, trying to transition it to a straight armbar. And Henderson somehow survives and escapes his submissions. He gets hit with this huge left hand that basically sends him flying into the cage. I thought it was over. In this onslaught, Lombard ends up clinching up and trips Henderson to the mat for the rest of the round, I think with 30 seconds left. And out the gate, Henderson's tossing kicks, and he's almost using this as a way to force Lombard to kind of close up for a second. A high kick from Henderson lands.
Oh, he head kicked him. Oh, he had Henderson. Henderson! Dan Henderson! Knocked out!
It lands clean. Lombard goes down, just crumbles, and Henderson lands this short leaping elbow for good measure. What a knockout! This fight's kind of wild, and then it's randomly slow as well. Which makes sense considering we have an aging veteran in there. But sure, whatever. I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. Honestly, some really great action moments. Next, we have a featherweight matchup between the future Hall of Famer Max Holloway and Ricardo Lamas. You know, every retro review, I always have that guy that I go, just go back and watch his career. It's awesome. Ricardo Lamas is that guy for me on this card. 11 finishes in his career, and some of them were awesomely brutal. This dude was the epitome of that aggressive top game wrestler at featherweight, and he had a really underrated submission and striking game as well. Max Holloway, on the other hand, needs no introduction, I think. He's one of the best fighters in our sport's history and a unanimous top 3 at featherweight. And at this point, he's on this monster 8-fight winning streak that saw him evolve from this raw but super talented prospect into the absolute animal that we know him as today. So early on, Lamas is circling well, launching prodding kicks, just trying to keep Holloway at bay, who's almost out the gate stalking him. Lamas eventually shoots for a takedown, masterfully stuffed by Holloway. And that's the nature of this round, basically. Lamas can't get Max to the floor, and Max is lighting him up on the feet. Near the end of the round, Max lands a wheel kick on Lamas while he was predicting where he would circle out of a combination. It's just an easy Max round. The second round's a little better for Lamas, as he starts kind of to land some of these more kicks, but Max honestly still just stalking him, and he's landing the better quality and in better quantity shots. And Lamas, doesn't want that. He wants to fight a little closer, so he goes to shoot in. Max goes for a guillotine, nearly gets it. Lamas spins out. And honestly, pretty cool scrambling from both men. And this is just the round. Max dominating the striking, shrugging off grappling attempts. The round ends with Max on top, actually landing the big shot. So he even out-grappled him near the end. And the third round starts, and it's still just the Max Holloway show. Then something magnificent happens. Max Holloway points to the ground. Lamas nods back. And for the last seconds of the fight, both dudes just begin flinging everything they have at each other. It is one of the greatest things in the history of mankind. Max Holloway wins a decision, but how crazy is that ending? This fight should be a 7 out of 10 for me, but it's not. That finish makes it... I'm going to go 8.5 out of 10. Yeah, I'm not joking. I'm dead serious. That moment makes this fight for me. It's a great performance from Max, but it's just really one-sided, and I get kind of tired of one-sided fights. But that ending is too good. I don't care. Finally, for the co-main event, we got Dominick Cruz and Uriah Faber. And I want to give some disclosure here. I'm a massive Dominick Cruz fan, so I apologize if I sound any biased. I try not to never have too much bias unless it's like a joke, But I'm a pretty big Dominick Cruz fan. His herky-jerky footwork is really fun for me, and I personally think he's the greatest 135er ever. That is with a big what if in his career. This dude was arguably the pound-for-pound king before having one of the worst knee injuries ever that put him on the shelf for 3 years. He came back for one fight. Then he had him again, and he was out for almost 2 years after that. And then he immediately challenged TJ Dillashaw for the belt and won. This was his first title defense since coming back, and it was billed as almost like a continuation of the Dominick Cruz versus Team Alpha Male rivalry that they had. Faber, Dillashaw, and Benavidez were 3 guys that Cruz just beat. First round of this fight, it had some wild scrambles as Cruz early on gets this really big takedown. He has control for a while, and they begin flipping and flopping just all over the cage. And at one point, Faber actually picks Dom up to slam him, and as they land, Dom just flips over and gets top position for a moment. Really fun scrambles, but while they were on the feet, I felt like Dom's speed and reach was enough to kind of pull ahead on the scorecards personally. Uriah is continuing to put on the pressure, moving forward, and he's caught by this massive left hand that drops him hard. Cruz is just stalking him, landing these long, lanky punches and low kicks to just dominate the whole round. I think Faber landed 1 strike the entire round. Third round, more of the same, and now you can really see the dilemma Faber's in. Anytime he isn't backing up, Cruz is landing these ugly but effective punches on him, and he can't even lull Cruz into something, as the second he loads up, Cruz is gone. Fourth round, exact same thing. This time, Faber goes to pressure forward and is instantly rocked and knocked down. Faber survives, And Cruz is just coasting, just living up to his nickname, the Dominator, in this fight at this point. 5th round, and this round feels like the summary of the whole fight. All the big moments in the fight were basically revisited here. Cruz hurts Faber, just stunned him on the feet a couple times. Cruz gets a takedown, and he was able to control Faber for a moment before some of these awesome, crazy scrambles. Then, Faber's shorts were slipping off of him, kind of like they were in the first round momentarily. But in the 5th round, we got an unwelcome glance at Faber's second chin, if you catch my drift. Easy win for Dominick Cruz, though, on the scorecards. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say 7 out of 10 for this fight. It's a fun fight. Not bad at all. I hope I don't, make it sound like that. Again, just a one-sided domination. And, it's really kind of awkward considering how legendary this trilogy is. And I really like this trilogy still, though. I think this is still one of my favorite, probably my top 10 trilogies ever. Cruz would look to continue his comeback of the year and fighter of the year campaign in 2016. But in December of that year, sadly, he would suffer the second career loss to Cody Garbrandt. Faber fought twice more in 2016 before going 1-1 and calling it a career. He did come back, though, for 2 fights in 2019, getting a potentially early stoppage against Ricky Simone, before sadly just getting manhandled and wrecked by Petr Yan. Despite never winning UFC gold, Faber should be remembered for being one of the first stars of these lighterweight divisions. He was the face of WEC for a while when they were putting on just these all-time classic cards with some of the best fights ever. He was their guy. That was the guy they pushed, promoted to the heavens, and I think his legacy is going to be remembered for that. He was one of the first stars below 155 pounds. It's fantastic. And now we have our main event, a middleweight championship fight between Luke Rockhold and Michael Bisping, a rematch from a fight about a year and a half prior, where Rockhold dominated and submitted the count in the 2nd round. The main event was actually going to be a title rematch between the new champ, Luke Rockhold, who had just taken the strap from Chris, still his dad's boy, Weidman. And the prospect of the rematch at the time was kind of lukewarm reception-wise. A Weidman injury, though, forced him out of this card, and Jacare was also injured, and so the UFC was scrambling to find a replacement, and they finally found someone, Michael Bisping, who had just got done filming a XXX movie. Okay, not one of those movies, but like those Vin Diesel action movies. Something that gave this fight a good kick in the rear promotion-wise was the unbelievably magnificent trash-talking spectacle that Michael Bisping put on. Honestly, I scored Bisping a 10-8 just at the press conference. After all that trash-talking, they finally get in the cage. And when they're face-to-face hearing the rules about to touch gloves, Rockhold tells Bisping, I don't want to touch gloves. Bisping responds by, no touch, I'll touch you in a second, A great sign of things to come. And Bisping staying busy early, trying to get these flicking jabs going, trying to sneak a right hand through the open guard. Well, Rockhold's mostly using these kicking attacks. It's definitely a closer affair from the jump than their first fight were, but the kicks of Rockhold just have this sick thud to him. Rockhold is just kind of walking with this aura of invincibility and ego that hands are low, chin high up in the air, and stalking. And he's going in for a big jab, and Bisping slips it and lands a left hand that drops Rockhold hard. And that's it. Michael Bisping becomes the first ever British world champion in UFC history. And, oh man, from an entertainment value, this fight isn't as high. But this fight's a 9 out of 10, easily. Because of how insane this upset was and how big of a moment it was for MMA in the UK. After this fight, Rockhold was never the same. Rockhold was this guy with all the skill and talent and moveset to become this all-time great, but his chin failed him in a division where heavy hitters aren't necessarily hard to come by. Bisping, on the other hand, he finally got to become champion. After being a mid-carder in the UFC for a long time, this was his moment, and it's a moment that we can't take away. That being said, I think he's my pick for the worst champion ever, and I'm saying that as a fan of his. He had 3 guys who were rearing to get this shot. Yoel Romero, who was sending people to the Shadow Realm. Gegard Mousasi, who eventually would just leave in frustration after this whole title picture mess. And then my pick for the real best middleweight at the time is Robert Whittaker. He didn't fight any of them. He fought Dan Henderson, who wasn't even in the top 10. This series of events led to a top contender leaving the promotion, another being uncrowned for over a year, and another never to get the title shot he had earned multiple times. It's a ridiculous scenario that honestly really stings looking back. So my final thoughts for this fight, or this whole fight card. It's great. I'm gonna give this an 8 out of 10 overall, as it had a little something for everyone, I feel like. But a lot of the fights were just too one-sided for me to really push it over the top. I still enjoy this card though, and I think it's a really important one. Because right now the UK, it has a ton of great prospects and stars in our sport. They're one of the biggest fan bases right now, and them finally getting a champion to call their own has to be huge. Alright, well that's all I have here. And if you have an idea of a card you want me to review, then go to our Patreon, suggest it. I'll be happy to do it. And if you like this series, please drop a like and comment. I love seeing all the comments on these retro reviews because, you know, this is my baby. I love doing this series. And if you really miss seeing me, then go over to our second channel, INC Live, where I recap every UFC fight card after they happen, and I make insanely obscure references in the hopes that someone will get them. Anyways, I'm Joe with the INC, and thank you for watching.